Okay, I've got 1:02 Central Time, so let's go ahead and get started, and we'll put this recording up for everybody to review at the end if you missed something or need to step away. So you'll have that for your records. But I see a lot of familiar faces in here, so thanks for joining. For those of you who may be new, we are the Commonwealth Group. We are a customizable fulfillment services company. We offer contract underwriting, contract processing, condo project reviews through our subsidiary company, Condo Analytics, quality control, both pre-funding, post-closing. We have a lock desk service, and what we're going to be talking about today is our LOS admin service. A little bit about it. I won't go into too much detail, and I'll turn it over to Wesley here, but we don't carry any minimums for our services, so you can get signed up with us and just simply have the contract active in the background. If you're not sending us underwrites or files for processing or files for QC, you're not getting a bill from us. There are no setup fees. And all of our employees are here in the USA. Very experienced group of guys and girls. Very proud to work with them, and would love it if you guys reached out if you need any of those services. We'd be happy to have a conversation with you. But today we're going to focus on LOS admin. I've got Wesley Kinslow with us today. He is our Director of Information and Technology and our resident certified Encompass admin. He has close to 2 decades worth of experience in LOS administration and other technological fields. Very knowledgeable, really good problem solver. Chances are, if you've got something going on with your LOS that you may not know how to figure out, he'd be a great person to ask how to, and great with all of that. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Wesley. Cheers.
All right, thanks, Martin. Appreciate it. Happy to meet everybody. Some of you already probably know me, either from this company with Commonwealth or another company that I've worked with in the past, or other places I've worked. My name is Wesley Kinslow, certified Encompass admin. Worked with tons of other LOS systems. The main thing we're going to cover today, we're going to try and keep it super brief. I don't want to keep everybody all afternoon. But the main things we're going to cover today are just kind of checklist items, bookkeeping, things that are commonly forgotten whenever your LOS rolls over to a new year. I know that we're almost to the end of January, but you'd be surprised at how many things people miss. And you may have all these covered. If so, consider this like a peace of mind review. So you're like, yeah, I did that. Yeah, I did that. So if you have all those, then you're good to go. Yeah. And then also after that, I want to add a little bit of extra value to the end. I want to review some things in Input Form Builder. Input Form Builder is, of course, an Encompass specific utility that lets you build your own input forms. It's pretty intimidating if you haven't jumped into it yet, or have never worked in like a visual based coding or input form platform like that. But yeah, we're going to review all the basics of it, take some Q&A from that as well, and give you guys a little bit more confidence with that. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to start this PowerPoint. All right, so yeah, Martin's already gone over this. Yeah, again, get with Martin if you want to go over any of the other things that we do as far as contract underwriting, processing, etc. But the focus for me is going to be loan origination system management, tech stack consultation, system administration. We do everything from developing business rules, reviewing permissions. We do a lot of full system analytics. So that's kind of going through and looking at the efficiencies of your system, making sure there aren't any holes. So just think of it as kind of like a tech audit from a LOS standpoint. So it's going to both inform your IT departments and the security surrounding that, and also just the efficiency and performance of the system in total. So, among other things. All right, so the big things we're going to go over today are tables, updating your LOS tables. Of course, we're doing it from the focus of Encompass. So I'm not going to go over all those because we have a slide for each one of those. Updating your reports, dashboards, etc. So any of your reporting things, reviewing your user permissions and your hierarchy, and fees and policies that you may need to change. All right. So this is the main place that you're going to find the tables if you are Encompass that you need to be focused on. Not all of these are going to be relevant to every entity. You may not do HELOCs, for example. So updating your HELOC historical tables is not going to be super interesting to you in this presentation. I guarantee you that just about every single one of these, or out of all of these, one of these is going to be relevant to your lender if you use Encompass. I always go through and check these no matter who I'm working with. So I work with multiple loan origination systems, obviously, work with multiple lenders. But like I said, so I always go through all these and make sure they're updated regardless. So even if you don't really have a use to update the MI tables for FHA and VA, I still go through and update those for my clients to make sure that they are updated in case they do use them later in the year or whatever. It's literally seconds to update these things, but it's important to do. So we're going to review first the MI tables. Again, if you want to take screenshots or go into your own system as we're going through and just update these, that would be good too. This is just in your Encompass file settings, Encompass settings, expand tables and fees, and all of these are going to be centric to this tables and fees portion, all kind of packed right in the row. So the first one is going to be MI tables. So it's kind of tricky because if you just open up MI tables, you're not going to see a download button. You're going to see a conventional tab. You have to tab to the FHA download and VA download portions of the MI tables table. And each one of those, you're going to have to click on the FHA download and then download, VA download, and then download. And this is going to update your FHA and VA MI tables. So this is whenever you click the Get MI button for those programs, it makes sure that the tables that you're pulling from are accurate. I always do this. Usually I wait till like the second week of January. So we're not too far off from that. But that's for pretty much all of these. Some of these are new tables, which is another reason why we need to review this. So some of these tables that we're going to review are brand new tables. They're new as of the last year. So you may have never updated these depending on how much you get into this part of your system. But anyway, so this is the first one, MI tables, really straightforward. Click on each tab, download, you're good to go. Next one's a little bit, it's not really that much more complex, but we're going to go into the FHA county limits. So this is allowing your system to know what the FHA county limits are for the database that HUD has. So for this one, I will note that whenever you first load it, at least on the systems that I've been in, it's going to default to the 2023 HUD text file. That's not the one you want. So you're going to have to click up here first to make sure that you're highlighting the new January 2024 ones. They should be updated now. And then you're just going to click synchronize, and those will synchronize with your system. So you'll have all the new upper limits for FHA county limits. In most systems, this enforced loan limits is going to be checked. If it's unchecked, obviously leave it unchecked or review it. It's just one more feature that Encompass has that says, hey, if these are out of spec, it's going to have a pop-up and warn you about it. So most places are going to have that checked, but don't toggle that if you're in this, if you don't know what the setting's supposed to be for it. All right. Conventional county limits. So some of these are like conventional county limits. I think this one's a little over a year old. I can't remember the exact when it popped in. It's been there a minute, but it is a newer one in the grand scheme of things. Yeah, so similar to the last one, it's going to be defaulting to the 2023 version. You're going to make sure that you pop up. You're going to be selecting this first one for full loan limits 2024, hitting synchronize, and you're good to go on that one. No tabs or anything to worry about, just making sure that you're on the right, making sure that you're actually downloading the right Excel file for this one. All right, federal threshold adjustments. So this is for QM, HOPA things. We're just going to click synchronize. Make sure that it has the newest year models for the federal threshold adjustments. AMI. the area medium income limits. Again, this is right on down the list. So we skipped the first one, HELOCs, but that's the one that's going to be, not necessarily everybody does HELOCs. We'll do that one last. And this one's also super easy. This is, you don't have to tab up or click anything. You literally just click download, make sure that your dates are updated here. This will tell you the last time these were updated. All right, and then finally our HELOC table. So we're going to go back up to the HELOC tables for that one. You may not have a HELOC historical index table, a custom one. This may surprise you, especially if you are a lender that does HELOCs. It's probably a good idea to, depending on how you do HELOCs. Some people do them, they don't really have their system ready to leverage the HELOC functionality that Encompass has. They might be kind of doing it in a very old school way, still using Encompass as the LOS for that. But they've added a lot of features that help out with HELOCs, including adding your own historical table with its own index and everything. In this case, we're just going to be adding the 2024 index, which would, it's pretty straightforward. It's just adding, putting in the year and putting in whatever the index is. Wall Street Journal Prime was 8.5, so updated one of those last week. Should be accurate. All right. Did anybody have any questions or anything? I mean, these are all pretty straightforward.
I'll keep an eye on the chat box here.
Okay, I appreciate
Wesley.
that. I was gonna say I'm in tunnel vision doing this. Most people probably are either already aware of these or are finding these out and updating them pretty quickly. Again, this is just more or less a, hey, did you think about this stuff kind of a reminder meeting.
No, this is great.
All right. So these after that, so that's our table updates. Those are all the table updates that I regularly do for all the systems that I manage. So that's good on that part. The other thing that I do is reviewing user permissions and hierarchy. Again, this is traditionally January is like one of your lower months. I know, lending is kind of wonky right now. Depending on how your volume is, you might have more volume in January than you did, middle of spring last year or summer last year, just because of the way interest rates and things have gone. But if you do have some breathing room right now, this is a good time to look through this user setup. In Encompass, that means reviewing the hierarchy. So that's going through, looking through all of the users that you have in your hierarchy, making sure that they're in the right place, making sure there isn't any kind of organization that needs to happen there. One of the biggest ones that gets missed is usually users get disabled and left in the hierarchy. But you might want to set up a disabled users folder that you can kind of move them to so they don't start showing up in whenever you're assigning people the loans. Again, anything that has to do with reviewing user setup, user permissions, things like that. I know it can get pretty complex and confusing, especially when you're trying to figure out permissions specifically. Again, that's something that we could help with. So if you want to set up a call for consultation, hit up Martin, and we can kind of go from there. So hierarchy. The other thing that you want to do when you're going through that hierarchy is not just kind of calling your inactive users and putting them down into your disabled users folder. We're also reviewing, it's a good time of year to review things like your NMLS numbers and your LO licenses and state licenses for your total lending entity. So if you don't have, one thing about Encompass is it doesn't require you to put in any kind of license dates. You can just put in, hey, we have a number, it's valid, believe us, and you don't have to put in like an expiration date in Encompass. A lot of people don't put in an expiration date in Encompass because it can cause a complication if you're outside of that range. But that's an extra reason to make sure you go in and make sure your licenses are accurate and good to go, both at an organizational level, like for your entire lending organization, and for your individual users as well. So it can take an afternoon, kind of go through each user, make sure their NMLS is set up, because it's a lot easier to do it that way proactively than it is to respond to a Maven fail because their NMLS is out of whack or whatever. And again, this is in tandem with your a lot of places your compliance group is your operations group. But if those are separate, this is also kind of a good way to get in with them, communicate with them, make sure everything are managed for that. Yeah. Another thing is reviewing your user permissions. This time of year is a good time to go through your persona access to loans, your user groups. And you can do that from, if you go into an individual user in the hierarchy, you can kind of see, hey, here are all the group accesses that this user has. And see their group through their individual group management. You can kind of see, hey, here are all the groups that this user belongs to. Here are the permissions they have for folders, things like that. So it's probably a good idea with your, day-to-day end user, your loan officers, your processors, and things like that. Make sure that they don't have expanded access that they probably shouldn't. Right.
Hey, Wesley, I've got a question for you.
Sure. Yeah.
This one's from Carmen. If someone leaves the company, is it better to delete the user than to just disable them?
That is a good question. It is not usually best practices to delete the user, surprisingly. So, and the reason for that is because that user had loans. They're loans that are still, presumably they had loans. I guess if they got in, worked 2 weeks, and didn't add anything to the pipeline, sure, that's probably a safe one to delete. But if they had any interaction, added loans to the pipeline that could be auditable in any way, it's probably a smarter idea to leave them active and just disable their account and move them out in your hierarchy down to your disabled users folder if you have one. Again, if you don't have one, you can always add a disabled users folder, similar to the way the screenshot's set up here. But yeah, and the reasoning for that is, so if you delete the user, all of that user, every loan that user is associated with in the system, you would, at that time of deletion, have to determine where it goes. So you could either take it on as your own loan, you can assign someone else. So whichever role that user was that got removed from the system would get ported over to someone else or yourself, which is fine. But usually for historical reasons, especially loans that are likely to be dispositioned or maybe picked up by a different loan officer, we usually keep those just in a disabled state associated with their existing loans. Now, there is a tool in Encompass that you can use to go and say, hey, this loan officer or this user's loans, I want the same role to be assigned to a different person. So that's what I would do there. And even then, I probably wouldn't delete the user as long as they're disabled, just for historical reasons, to say, hey, this person did work here. Here's what they did in the system. If you delete them, you're losing a lot of data surrounding that user's existence in your company. So great question. Yep.
Perfect.
All right. Yeah. So user groups. Again, you can review that from the group side or from the individual user side using the groups tool. Both are pretty valid, but both probably need to be reviewed from time to time. And then your persona access to loans. Those are always a constant struggle with a ton of companies. Your company may not have a setup for persona access to loans that you're happy with. Again, what persona access to loans does is essentially it essentially says this user, let's say a loan officer when a file is opened, I want them to have access to it. I want them to have full edit access to these certain screens. I want them to be able to do this, and this. And then whenever it's passed over to processing or underwriting or whatever, then hey, they lose a good bit of their access. They have view only access, and they can add to the conversation log. They can get to the e folder and do everything but delete things, whatever. It changes the user's access over the life of the loan. So as the loan evolves and changes, so does the user's permissions. So a lot of people's systems, especially smaller lenders, that people have to wear a ton of different hats. It's the Wild West. It's everybody has access to everything all the time. And it's a nightmare for your more technical roles like your underwriters. Even your closers sometimes can get frazzled by that, because if you're relying on a constant, you're relying, hey, this file is supposed to be consistent. I just reviewed the income and someone comes and changes the income. That's incredibly frustrating as an underwriter. So at least I would say at least make sure that you have some persona access to loans rules surrounding your underwriting process through maybe post-closing. I know it's a lot of hands on deck and everybody's working on things before that, but I would suggest trying to get some kind of a process going for persona access to loans going forward. in that part of the process. Again, something that I've done dozens and dozens and dozens of times at this point. So if you want to hit us up, we can work on that with you. Your system settings. This is one that gets forgotten a lot, especially if you have people that don't understand the ramifications of it. They may be looking at dashboards or running reports and things without realizing how inaccurate they are because certain dates aren't updated. So this is just kind of going through and your key reports that you know are either going to be delivered to executives or you're going to rely on for historical data or for, industry target, whatever. Make sure that your dates are going to be accurate in that. And so what does that mean? It means going in, if you have any uh, milestone or filters in your reportings that are date based, make sure that they are accurate with this year's dates. Some of these are based on current year. And current year obviously changes over to 2024 whenever January rolls around. Again, these are things that are just more reminders. If these are things that you report on weekly, you've probably already encountered this issue. So I might be preaching to the choir on this one, but it's something especially if you realize it in December or early January, it's not going to be a hiccup later on. You can get proactive with it and get ahead of it. That's for reports. Pipeline's not as much, but dashboards are a huge problem with this. So dashboards, one of the features that dashboards has is a lot of dashboards you're looking at the current year for data. And that's unfortunate whenever you switch over. You're trying to, which you say current year, and you're really kind of looking at the last 30 days because the dashboard's logic makes things fall off after 30 days. So this year is going to kind of cover everything. But whenever you straddle into 2024, now some of your dashboards aren't really finding things that they should be finding. So that kind of requires a strategy of changing the dashboards to something that's like last 30 days. Unfortunately, last 30 days on dashboard doesn't mean today. So if I say I want to see the things that were RESPA triggered in the last 30 days, it's going to literally look at the last 30 days and not today. So that's pretty frustrating. There are ways around that with the dashboard logic that you can kind of finagle. But yeah, it's just more to be mindful of it because a lot of your end users will look at things not realizing that the dates are important and maybe start acting on data that's not accurate. And then of course, new fees and policies. A lot of times in January, a lot of banks and lenders will decide that they want to change their fees, especially in today's climate. Change their fees, their policies. So that means rolling out new fees and policies, which could mean updating anything from closing cost templates for fees or DDM rules. So if you have never used DDM rules, DDM stands for Dynamic Data Management Rules. Think of them like super triggers. So they're like loan triggers that will update every time the loan file is saved. Or you can base it on other things, but that's the big one. So imagine a trigger. One of the biggest challenges with writing a business rule that is a field trigger is determining what event is going to make it happen consistently. DDM rules kind of takes that out because the save event is what makes it happen, which is obviously going to happen every time that you exit a loan and meaningfully save. So a lot of lenders have moved over to creating, instead of using closing cost templates at all, they've created a series of DDM rules that manage their fees. So their users don't even have to apply closing cost templates. Basically, the DDM rule will go in and say, hey, this is X kind of loan. This is this loan program or this state or whatever, and it applies the fees automatically. So yeah, so make sure those DDM rules are updated with any new fees or policies. And that doesn't just include your internal like lender, their decisions to make fees. It could also mean regulatory changes or fee regulations for specific lending entities like regions is what I'm trying to get at. So if you have any of those changes, make sure those are updated as well. Again, DDM rules or closing cost templates for that matter is something we can help with. And with that, so after this presentation part is over, I'm going to move over to Input Form Builder. I don't know which people are here for what, but yeah, The input form builder is a tool that you use in Encompass that lets you create your own custom input forms. What do I mean by input forms? That's like whenever you go to the borrower some origination, you can go to the borrower some origination and make it custom. So you can create your own separate borrower some origination and cut out the things you don't use and add things you might need for that, and kind of make it a one-stop shopping spot for your loan officers or things. So yes, just a quick rundown of all that. So introduction to your controls, control properties, how to link fields and things like that. Quick explanation of load events, and just show you some quick tips and tricks surrounding it. Nothing too crazy. But if you are already privy to all of that, if you know that, you might want to cut out early. But if you want to stick around for that, I encourage you to. So yes, you've already met me. So I'm the director of technology here at Commonwealth. We also have another certified admin on staff who's Dalton Skinner. He's pretty amazing. He also manages Condo Analytics, which is a condo management platform. But he also helps out from time to time if we have more stuff for the Encompass side. And that's what I got. So this is my contact information. This is my cell phone number. Please don't abuse that. But I like getting calls from everybody, even if it's just the most mundane things. And of course, my email address. And you can question us. It's any questions you have in general, info@thecommonwealth.net. All right. Perfect. All right. So I think I already have input form builder loaded. All right. Martin, do we have any more questions or anything?
No more right now.
Sweet. Yeah, like I said, a lot of that's pretty straightforward, but it's good to go over.
Yeah. No, I learned a lot.
Sweet.
That's not hard though.
All right, input form builder. Again, if you don't want to know anything about this, or if you already think you know a fair bit about this is going to be very rudimentary stuff, but it's definitely going to get you started if you are not familiar with it. So input form builder itself, if you go to different people are set up different ways. As far as navigating to input form builder, this is Windows 11, so I just type in input form builder and it finds it. So that's nice. But yeah, so getting that, it's going to use the same credentials that you have for Encompass. And again, unless your persona specifically says that you are able to use input form builder, you're not going to be able to use it. So if you go to log into input form builder and it gives you the screen that won't let you go forward, that means that you don't have access to input form builder, and you need to request from your admin to get access to form builder should they want you to have it. But most people here are going to be admins or ops type people, so you probably have access to this anyway. So when you load it up, it's not going to look like this. It's going to kind of have like a load screen and say, hey, here are the most recent custom forms. A lot of places won't have a single custom form. Like it'll look something like this. There won't be any recents for you. This will be the first time you do it. So this is a good place to go. So these buttons up at the top, this is a new form. That's what I've started here for us to kind of play around with. Open is going to open existing custom input forms. You may have never added one of these before in your life. You log into this, you click on custom input forms here, and you see some of them, and you're like, wait, I didn't add any of these. Who added these? Sometimes when Encompass rolls out updates, they actually use the custom input form builder and roll it out to everybody. So there is a chance that there might be some custom input forms here that Encompass built and added to your system, like whenever it does its semi-annual updates. Also, some vendors. Like this is like we got A and B reports. A lot of times there might be a vendor specific input form that has been added to your system. So you might have like an MI screen or something that your MI provider built for you and added as part of your setup. So that could be a thing too. Yeah. But yeah, so this is how you access your existing custom input forms. And there's also a way that you can open your standard input forms as well. Standard input forms are the ones that are already pre-built in the system. And so earlier, whenever I said you could build your own custom input screen, custom borrower sim origination, that doesn't mean you can take the existing borrower sim origination that Encompass built and change and alter that. That's going to be fixed. You can't change and alter that. You can, however, make your own version of it, like this one has. Okay. Yeah. So, and also that's a good way to start. So I'm actually going to open that up. So I'm going to click open standard input form, and this is going to open a separate input form. I'm going to say borrower sim origination. It's going to warn us standard forms can be used as templates for creating custom forms, but can't be overridden. Same thing I just told you. And so that's going to pop up a new tab, and a very familiar screen, if you have used Encompass, is going to pop up. You'll notice there's some weird panels out to the side. That's because Encompass does some very creative things whenever loans are either different 1003 types or different, depending on the screen, it can do different things. But long story short, there are load events, background load events that will move these over the top of these existing ones. And that's why certain screens like the borrower sim origination look different whenever you load them under different constraints, like under different 1003 types or different HMDA versions. Yeah. But anyway, so we're not going to worry about that. What we're going to do is what we want for our, we have this new input form. I don't know what we're going to build. It could be anything. But before we go too deep into it, let's go into controls. All right. Controls are all these things across the side that kind of represent all the different kinds of things that you can do and Encompass or add to an input form. So for example, let's say we wanted a button that did something. Okay. So that's clearly going to be a button. All you have to do is very simply select button here, and we're going to click and drag it onto the form. So if we wanted like a checkbox, click it, drag it onto the form. From there, you can click and drag it around. Okay. So, and obviously we don't want to say your label here or button one forever. And so that is going to be updating each of the controls properties. That's what we'll cover last. First, I want to kind of cover the different kind of controls there are. Labels, very straightforward. If you just want text to show up on an input form, you're going to click, drag it over, and change the text. Hyperlink, this doesn't get used that often, but it could. So this is going to add a link somewhere in the input form. If you click it, it's not going to open in Encompass. It's going to open outside of Encompass. So it's going to open up your web browser and say a thing, which could be useful. Like say if you were making a, I don't know, it could be anything, a USDA form. You could have a link to some HUD things or different articles for that for reminders for folks. You could also have links to your own personal bank's webpage. So if you had policies and things that you'd want to review for certain loan programs that you had posted online on your website, you could put a hyperlink directly to it here. Images. This one can get kind of interesting. So this one, I probably won't go too deep into this one because this is getting kind of fancy, but you could theoretically with this, you can put your logo and things like that. It can kind of get a little weird with hosting images and all that jazz. But anyway, but that's your images. Panels. So panels are kind of giving, the big thing panels do is they are good for organization. So you can have a panel with multiple things on it. And let's say, so now instead of moving those three things individually, I can click here and move the entire panel around, right? So that think of it kind of like a platter that you're putting things on. One thing for if there are any old school people that use Input Form Builder every day, the plus key on your number pad or on your keyboard in general, plus is really useful because it lets you highlight everything within a panel or category box, group box. Not everybody's familiar with that one, but just hitting the plus key has saved me so many hours, especially when you have like literally hundreds of fields that you have linked on a input form. But yeah, panels are really good whenever you're strategizing how you're going to organize an input form, because it gives you a lot of the ways. It gives you a lot of leeway as to how you organize it and keep it. Keep it to where you don't have to redo things. Another neat thing with that is you can copy paste that panel. and you have you have a mirror of everything you did within that one panel. So if you have, like, for instance, if you had an input form that needed multiple panels that needed to look very similar and were similar in functionality, instead of reinventing the wheel over and over again, you can add a panel first and then add what you wanted to that panel, copy that, paste it around, and change the outcomes on each of the panels, but everything will still look the same, which is very neat. Text boxes, this is how you allow users to put text into a file. You'll notice there's no labeling to this, so usually this has to work in conjunction with our label control. So we can put that here, and right after it, we can say, hey, this is what this field is. Multi-line text boxes. So this is kind of where if you want to put like a notes section, that's pretty good for that. So think of this as just a way that you can type, but instead of it being constrained by this short field here, you can write a paragraph here if you wanted to. Drop down box and drop down edit box are very similar. So drop down box, you're going to use that to, this is where you put multiple variables in a drop down for users. The drop down box is just going to have the exact variables that you want from that drop down. So let's say if you just wanted, like, for example, loan program, we could have that. And loan program, you probably want it to be very specific things. You don't want people to add whatever version they want to it. But let's say that we have a drop down edit box, and so that's your drop down box. You want those for fixed values. Drop down edit box, you want it for fixed values, but you want to give your users a little creativity. This is rare, but it can happen. So in that case, think of, like, say, referrals. Okay, so we have a drop down, and this referral says, hey, this program referral. Hey, this realtor that gives us a ton of referrals. Hey, these 15 things that are our most common referrals, but you may have Meemaw down the street who gave me the referral. And so we're going to type into that. So we want the user to be able to type in Meemaw down the street. And yeah, so that's when we would use a drop down edit box. So this one's super rigid. We want you to use these 10 values, nothing but those. Great for reporting, great for data consistency. Drop down edit box, that's more giving the freedom to your user to add things. Those are cases where data consistency isn't as important, even though we might report on it, but it could give us extra leeway, for them to put in whatever they think is necessary. All right, a pick list. So it's kind of similar to a drop down box, except it kind of expands out when you use it. Very similar in functionality there. Check boxes, you've seen these all over forms, so we've already added a couple of those. So check boxes, those are just going to be usually, you can make these. We haven't really gotten into the field types and the field source and everything like that yet, but these are usually going to be yes, no values. If it's checked, it's yes. If it's not, it's no. That's kind of oversimplification, but yeah. Radio buttons. So that if you want to have, hey, here are these 3 variables, and if I click here, then it's this answer. Click here, it's this answer, and it changes. Yeah. So yeah, so it's very similar to a checkbox, but it has different functionality, because if these 3 are the same fields, you're going to make sure they're each. Actually, let's make at least 2 of those for our example here in a second. Neat. The buttons, we already got one up. Image button, this is just a fancier button. So if you want a button with, like, a Fannie Mae logo on it or something like that, you could technically do that. Standard button. So you've seen these in the system. So got these standard buttons. They are going to be tied to specific actions. Let me find one of those for you real quick so you know what I'm talking about. Here we go. All right, so this is the total monthly payment. So notice here, I'm skipping ahead for the properties, but that's okay. So notice how this says all lowercase, all one big word, total monthly payment. That's a kind of a code word, a standard button behavior that Encompass has said, hey, when you click a button that is tied to this action, it's going to do the same thing as this button. So these are kind of hard to use because you kind of have to guess. So this one's income. The one for this one is just lowercase income. So you kind of have to guess what Encompass's behavior code word is to make these buttons function the way you want them to. And they're all wildly different. This is total monthly payment. So yeah, but anyway, so yeah, calendar, that can bring up the little calendar that lets you select a date so you don't have to type one out. Very useful. Rolodex, borrower link, those are things that interact with your contacts in Encompass. field lock. So this is getting kind of complex already, but yeah. So field locks, you know how those work. So if there is a calculation associated with this field, this lets you toggle the ability to let that field rigidly stick to that calculation or be open-ended as something you can change. Typically, you don't want people to be using these that much. So these don't always go into custom forms, but they can. Some of these other ones, so zip code lookup, that's of course if you're if you want the field to adhere to like a zip code database, there's that thing. Contact button also interacts with the file contacts. Horizontal and vertical rule, those are just to make things prettier. So that's just spacers and things to organize things and make it look a little sharper.
It seems like the sky's the limit with this.
Right. Category and group box. So these are kind of like big boy versions of this panel that we had earlier. So this is something you might want to start the foundation of an input form with that, or a group box. Yeah, and then sliders and vertical sliders, that gets into more technical things we're not going to get into today. All right, so that's a lot of controls to go over. But again, if you've used Encompass in any real capacity, you are familiar with a lot of these already. You've seen them. Does anybody have any questions? Do we have any things popping up? Any questions right now?
I don't see any extra questions right now.
Okay. So that means either people are zoning out, which I don't blame them.
No.
or it means that they're intently taking notes and being like, oh, I think I can do this. Okay, one or the other. Yeah. I'm good either way. So all right.
Well, all right. If everybody couldn't tell, Wesley is an absolute. He has an absolutely huge amount of knowledge about Encompass, and I encourage everybody to take what they've learned here with Form Builder and all the checklist items in Encompass, and try to apply them to their internal systems. And as always, here at the Commonwealth Group, we love questions. We love hearing from everybody. As you play with these tools, please, and you have questions or you run into roadblocks, we encourage you to reach out to Wesley or myself. We'd love to hop on the telephone with you and maybe do a share screen to see if we can't figure it out together. From being in these systems for almost 20 years, Wesley's seen it all, just about everything, and chances are we can help you get it figured out. But I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today.